The problem is that teaching creationism is a violation of professional responsibility. It flouts the requirements of the state-mandated science standards, and it may conflict with the goals of the local curriculum. And that curriculum is usually designed to instruct students over the course of multiple classes. Now, I know for a fact that students who have had their time wasted with misconceived creationist notions in the classroom, who have learned nothing at all about evolution, are very poorly prepared for a degree program in college biology. This ought to be the ultimate bottom line. If you have a student in the high schools who you have hopes for, you'd like him to be something more than a ditch digger, I presume. And you may be thinking, my son or daughter would like to go into medical school, they'd like to get an advanced degree, they'd like to do research, all of these kinds of important things that some of us think are pretty cool. You are crippling them when you support the teaching of intelligent design in the classroom. Because what's going to happen is they're not going to get this body of knowledge that they need in order to succeed. I see it every year with students coming into my class. And this is not a class where I use creationists. No, that's not the case. This is not where I preach at them about atheism. Nothing like that is going on. It's just the facts. Here's the theory of evolution. Here's the evidence. Here's the experiments. We go over all of these things. And students who have not been exposed to them before suddenly find themselves working twice as hard as the students who've been fully informed. And that's not fair. There's not much we can do about it, though. The other choice is that we turn our classrooms into a remedial class, and that means that all the students who are well prepared find themselves handicapped when they move on to the next year. In a lot of ways, the biology curriculum is on rails. You are expected to come into the classroom in your first year, and you're expected to cover the basics. You're supposed to understand basic chemistry, you're supposed to understand the basics of biology, and then every year after that, it gets harder and harder, more and more detailed. And if you knock out the foundations on the students first, you're hurting them. So that's what I mean when I say it's a professional responsibility to not waste the students' time with teaching intelligent design in the classroom. And I will stop there.
All right. So you made up for being late. You got
good.
4.5
Okay.
minutes,
right.
You're all set. Okay. So now we have. Let me reset this counter here. Now we're going to have 10-minute rebuttals from each speaker. Dr. Bergman will go first, and then after 10 minutes from Dr. Bergman, we'll get 10 minutes from Dr. Myers. Okay, Dr. Bergman.
I should have taken a course called Speed Talking in college, but I didn't take it, so what do you do? Darwin's finches, I teach the same thing you do. The need a theory, that's true, that's a problem. There is not a coherent theory of intelligent design. No published papers, not true at all. There are thousands of published papers. A lot of these people have to be in the closet, because once you publish a paper which you openly support ID, good luck publishing again, because it's very, very difficult. And so many of my colleagues that I know who publish ID papers are in the closet, and there are many. There are thousands of papers. One colleague alone has almost 600 papers that he's published in major journals in his area, but he's pretty much in the closet. He's not in the closet with me. Age of the Earth, intelligent design is looking at a very specific thing. They're not concerned with the Trinity, the age of the Earth, the flood, these other questions. They're focused on a very specific thing. They're not trying to answer theological questions. As you said, it's the Big Ten. That's true. And they're very concerned about very specific topics, such as evidence for intelligence in the natural world. So therefore, they don't concern themselves with the age of the Earth. My own experience, I would say 80 to 90% of intelligent design supporters are not young Earth creationists. The vast majority accept the 4.6 billion years for the age of the Earth. Appendix, hope you don't teach in medical school. All of the anatomy books that I've used, I've taught anatomy for 20 years, both in a medical school and in Northwest State. All the anatomy books that I use brought out specifically the several functions of the appendix. It's part of the body's immune system. A recent function now there's good evidence for is that it stores benign bacteria, so that if the colon bacteria is destroyed for some reason, it can be replaced effectively and rapidly with the bacteria, which basically fill up the places to reduce the likelihood of pathogenic bacteria taking over. And students taught creation. The concern is they don't do as well. Actually, there are quite a few studies. Just last week, I was talking to a person who teaches at a Christian school, and they teach creationism in his school. They do annual testing, and they are on the average of 1 to 2 grades ahead of the public schools. There have been a number of studies of students who went to various schools that teach creationism, and it's found in general they are generally considerably ahead, sometimes as much as 3 grades ahead of their partners that go to a public school. One example of intelligent design, which I'll mention, started to, is irreducible complexity. Again, this is where the idea is for something to function, there must be 2 or more parts. I should mention this idea dates back to Aristotle. Michael Poloni, an Oxford professor who's dead now, in Science magazine, he published an article called Life's Irreducible Structure, where he talked about irreducible complexity, one of many articles which covers this. Human body, certainly irreducibly complex. You must have certain structures to function. Without these structures, you will not function. You're looking at legs, well, you don't need them. There's certain parts you don't need them. Well, if you want to be a runner, generally it helps to have such structures. Thus, irreducible complexity is a concept I think that students should understand. The watch example, I mentioned the court have ruled, quote, the argument of irreducible complexity central to ID has been refuted in peer-reviewed research papers and has been rejected by the scientific community at large. And another quote, there's no peer-reviewed article supporting Professor He's arguments that certain complex molecule structures are irreducibly complex. And I have many, many other quotes which say the same thing. Widely accepted and widely taught in the journals that irreducible complexity has been refuted. Well, and here's another example. Let me give you an example. Quarks. Top, bottom, top, down, charm, strange, and so on, leptons. These are fundamental particles. Everything else is irreducibly complex. Mousetrap is a common example. I'll take a better example, the periodic table. In fact, there was a teacher in Ohio who was terminated, and in the court papers, a number of his teachers said he was let go because he, quote, taught the periodic table. Because the periodic table is irreducibly complex. A good example, to get carbon-12, you must have what? 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. If you have anything else, you will not have a carbon-12 atom. It is clearly, unequivocally, irreducibly complex. Right? Anybody teach chemistry? You must have a certain number of protons, electrons, and neutrons. Radios, televisions, MRI, automobiles, all life. Can you get radio, TV, or life out of a single quark? Out of a lepton? You can't. Everything is irreducibly complex, isn't it? By reasoning, and this is what I was taught when I studied chemistry. So can you imagine it? Well, teacher being fired for teaching the periodic table. So this is a good example of the fact that this aspect of ID has been verified. And interestingly, the question is ID religion? Well, Dennis Alexander says he believes in God but not ID. I guess he must not have studied chemistry. David Berlinski doesn't believe in God, but he does believe in ID. Lawrence Krauss doesn't believe in God or ID. Bradley Monton, he is researching this question and still is undecided as to where he is. The concern is ID true or false? Well, we'll have to look at specific aspects of ID. And certainly relative to irreducible complexity, well, fine. If you believe that it's been refuted, as is commonly believed and as a number of biology textbooks state it has been refuted, then fine. Show me the radio that works on the basis of a single lepton. Show me the radio or the human being. I'd like to meet a young lady who consists of a single quark. Do you think she could reproduce? Could I see her? Well, no. Is that possible? Yet the literature is very clear. Irreducible complexity has been refuted. It hasn't been refuted. And this is a concern that I have. One reason why I wrote the book called The Slaughter of the Dissidents is that if you teach this concept and they believe that you may support ID, or in one case, the court trial, there was a lot of questions as to what church he went to. And they found out he went to the Assembly of God. I don't know much about that church, but evidently that's not the right church to go to. So they really pushed, yes, this is part of him, and therefore, because he went to the Assembly of God, therefore he was teaching the periodic table, therefore we put this all together, he was obviously teaching intelligent design, therefore we felt justified in terminating him. When I follow my own students up, see how well they do in other classes, I find as a whole they have a better background in evolution because we're teaching both sides. And yet, still, it said, well, as P.Z. Meyer said, the idea of vestigial organs in humans, I assume he's referring to, is still true. It's not true. All of the organs which have been claimed to be vestigial, all 100, have clearly been documented as having a clear function. They are useful. And in many ways, I believe, evolution has gotten in the way of understanding our knowledge about the biological world. When I was in school, I remember I asked a lot of questions, and the professor said, well, it evolved that way. Well, why is this true? Well, it evolved that way. Well, that doesn't answer why it's that way. Why does it function this way? Well, it evolved that way. Natural selection, mutations cause some variation. Natural selection selected this structure. Therefore, that's why it is this way. It doesn't answer the question. I realize we can do the same thing with God. Why is this the way it is? Well, God made it that way. Why is this the way it is? Well, evolved that way. Neither of those responses answer the question. We need to go beyond God did it and beyond evolution did it. To me, that's God of the gaps and evolution of the gaps. All too often we fill our gaps in knowledge with evolution. In medicine, my major focus, we can't do that. We have to understand why something works the way it does so that we can, in essence, understand the problem and therefore fix the problem, such as cancer. And saying it evolved that way or God created it that way, neither answers the question. And so therefore we need to look at the data, which, by the way, in my school we really push the scientific method, which I strongly support. Students need to understand the scientific method, how it works and why it works, and therefore we have the tools to understand whether or not Darwinism, from the goo to you by way of the zoo, is a viable explanation for what we see in the natural world.
Thank you. All right. So far you guys are both doing very well on time. 11 seconds left. All right. So, Dr. Myers, you have 10 minutes to respond.
Okay. Well, this is interesting. I have all these notes on what intelligent design people say, and we'll throw them in. Basically, what Dr. Bergman has done is basically redefined everything in very peculiar ways. For instance, to claim that there are thousands of intelligent design papers in the scientific literature because their authors believe in intelligent design but just haven't said anything about it, is very misleading. Then those are not intelligent design papers. Okay, I may be an atheist, and I know that tens of thousands of scientists out there are atheists. But that does not mean that a paper that is describing a scientific result is an atheism paper. That's not the way it works. An intelligent design paper would discuss a specific concept in biology, would address it using theory of intelligent design, if there were one, and would show experiments and data to support it. There's no such paper out there. The only papers that have been published by the intelligent design theorists have all been rather speculative papers, theoretical papers that don't have any real data with them, and mainly exercise the author's mind in using his imagination to stretch things.